Okay, so in the last couple of lessons, we've looked at the first 4 steps in relation to carrying out a habitat study. So step 1 is picking your habitat. Step 2 is then really deciding on how much of the habitat you want to study. Step 3 is measuring these things that we call abiotic factors. Step 4 then is identifying what are known as the producers. Okay, so identifying the producers, things like plants, that through the process of photosynthesis can produce their own food. The next step then, so step 5 then really is to look at, we want to look at these other types of organisms that will be present within the habitat. And so step 5 is going to be about identifying what are called consumers. So step 5 is going to be about identifying consumers. Consumers. So really then, consumers then are organisms that they either consume other organisms or they consume producers. So for example, they consume plants. And they'll be identified or categorized based on what they actually do. So if we think about, so one very common example would be, so predators. So predators, and they relate directly with prey. So these two things are going to be, they're classified as consumers. So predators then are really animals that hunt, catch, and eat other animals. They're known as predators. And then prey, for example, animals that are hunted, caught, and eaten are known as prey. So we have animals. So for example, you might have a spider. So that would be a predator, and then its prey then is the fly. And these both are known as consumers. So spiders, and so spider and a fly. Okay, another one might be, so for example, a cat and a mouse. So again, these two things are predator and prey, and they're also consumers. So mice are going to eat other insects and things like that. And mice can also be predators for other insects, and then cats are predators as well because they hunt and catch their food. Within consumers, then they can be broken down. So all consumers then can be broken down into these areas depending on what they eat. So we have herbivores. Okay, so herbivores, and basically what they do is they consume plants. So herbivores, they consume plants. We have then what are known as, so for example, like a cow would be a herbivore. Then we have what are known as carnivores. So carnivores, and what they do is carnivores, they consume other animals. So for example, a fox, for example, would be an example of a carnivore. And then we have these other guys, which are known as omnivores. So omnivores, they're going to eat. So they will consume both. So plants and animals. So for example, some of us are omnivores. If you eat plants and animals, if you eat vegetables and meat, for example, you are what's known as an omnivore. So then if we think about like just a general definition then for these consumers, which is very important. So consumers then, so what are consumers? So they're organisms that feed on other organisms for their food. So that's what we mean. That's what consumers are. So they're organisms that feed on other organisms for food. You can break it down into predator and prey. So for example, predators are animals that hunt, trap, and consume other animals. And then prey are the animals that are hunted, trapped, and consumed by predators. And then consumers then can be further broken down into, depending on what they eat. So they can be herbivores, so they just consume plants or producers. So for example, a cow. They can be carnivores. They consume other animals. So for example, a cat. Or they can be omnivores. So they can consume plants and animals. So for example, humans. We are considered omnivores. Again, we need to think about so how do we go about identifying the types of consumers that we have present within our habitat. So the first thing, before we can identify them, we need to kind of catch them. So there's different ways that we can look at catching consumers, let's say, within the habitat. So just some of the different ways that we can go about, for example, catching some of these consumers. So we have this thing here that's called a pooter, P-O-O-T-E-R. And this is kind of like what it looks like here. This is what it looks like. So basically what it's used, so one tube is placed over the organism. So you can see here that we have this tube here. So this is the tube. And then this is your organism that you want to catch. Okay, so the insect. So the insect is pulled through this. Okay, so basically what you're doing is it sucks up the insect through this tube here. So one tube is placed over the organism, and you suck through the second tube with gauze. The gauze prevents you swallowing the organism as well. So you can see here on this side, so you have your jar, and then on this side you have another tube. And what you do is you suck through this tube, and basically what it does is it sucks up the insect into this jar, and then this gauze here stops you from sucking the insect up, from you swallowing the insect. And then this pooter, what it can be done is it can be used for small insects such as greenfly and spiders as well. So it can be used just to kind of suck them up and catch them. So that's one way that you can collect consumers, for example, within the habitat. The other way then is this here, they're known as beating trays. So basically a white sheet or tray is held under the leaves of a tree or shrub. The branches are shaken or beaten with a stick, and this dislodges the animals and they fall onto the sheet. And this is useful for insects and small animals that live on the leaves of shrubs and trees as well. So again, this is your idea here. So you have your tree, okay, you hold your sheet underneath the tree like so, and then you can use a stick and you can shake the tree or beat the tree, and any insects or animals that are small animals that are present, they're going to fall out of the tree into your sheet, and then you can collect them up and look at them and start to go through the process of identifying them. The next other piece then is this, what's known as a pitfall trap. So essentially, what is a pitfall trap? It's a jar is sunk into the ground, the mouth of the jar must be level with the soil, and a flat stone supported by small stones forms a lid, and the lid prevents rain getting in, for example. So this is kind of like what it looks like here. So imagine this is your jar, and you've dug a hole in the ground, and you sink the jar into it, and then you put these flat stones across it like so. So it's kind of like a little trap. And what happens is so animals, for example, ground beetles that walk along the surface of the ground, and they will basically walk along and fall into this. It's useful to compare animals that are out at night with those that are around during the day as well. So you can place this trap during the day or during the night and go back and check the next day and see what you've caught. So again, it's very important as well that this flat stone at the top is placed up here. So this just, if it rains, it stops it filling up with water. So again, these are three methods that you can use to capture consumers, let's say, within the habitat. So these are the three common ways that you can go about collecting consumers within a habitat. Now, once you have, for example, you've collected up your consumers, so using whichever method that you use to collect them, so you have animals, something like this. So again, what we can do is we can go back to using these things that we call keys. So keys are used then to identify the particular organism that you're interested in. So this is a key similar to the one that we use for the plants, but this key is going to be used to identify some of these what are known as invertebrates. So invertebrates are animals that do not have a like they don't have a backbone, for example. So they're known as invertebrates. So things like worms and spiders and snails and flies, for example, are known as invertebrates. But again, what we do is we can use this here, which is known as a key, and it can be used to identify a particular organism. So what you can do is you start off, so let's say if we take this guy, so we know it's a fly, but imagine if we wanted to know what particular type of fly it was. So what we do is we start off with our question. So has it got legs? So we can see here, we can look at her, and this is if you're looking at a particular animal that you had captured, for example, we can see that it clearly has legs. So has it legs? Yes. So we move over here, and then we go down to this next question. So has it got only 6 legs? So again, we identify how many legs it's got. So it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we can see that it has 6 legs. So yes, it has 6 legs. So we'd go down to this next piece. So has it got 2 pairs of wings? So again, we look at our animal and we can see there that it has 2 pairs of wings. So it has 2 pairs. So has it got 2 pairs of wings? And if we have a look here, it only has 2 wings. It doesn't have 2 pairs of wings. So for example, if it had another set of wings here and here, it would have 2 pairs of wings. So it doesn't have 2 pairs of wings, so we can say no. And then what this brings is this key then helps us to identify that this is a housefly, for example. So that's that one. So the same thing we can do with this guy here. So again, so has it got legs? So we can see that it doesn't really have legs. So this guy has legs, but this doesn't have legs. So no, it doesn't have legs. Has it got a shell? So we can see, yeah, it's got a shell. So this is its shell. Has it got a shell? Yes. So therefore, we know that we can identify this as a snail. So what I want you to do is just pause the video and give it a go for these 2 guys here. So just use the key, go through the key and identify whether, what these 2 animals are based on the key, based on what we have here. Okay, so let's have a look at this guy here. So again, we go to our key. Has it got legs? So we can see that it clearly has legs. And so it has it only got 6 legs? So let's count how many legs it has. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and maybe 9, 10. So it actually has 10 legs, so it doesn't have just 6 legs. So has it got only 8 legs? Okay, well actually, so we won't count these guys as legs. Has it got 8 legs? It has 4 on this side and 4 on this side. So it has 8 legs, so therefore it's a spider. So the key tells us that it's a spider. If we look at this one here, so again, has it got legs? No, it doesn't. Has it got a shell? It doesn't. So therefore, this key tells us that this is an earthworm as well. So again, these things that we call keys are are very important if you're an ecologist and you're studying a habitat. So once you've kind of collected or observed some of the animals or organisms that are within your habitat, you can use a key, for example, to identify those organisms. So then this is step 5 then in relation to, so step 5 in relation to the study of your habitat, you're studying the consumers. And just to summarize then what we've covered in this lesson, so we've looked at the different types of consumers that you can have. So what are consumers? So consumers are organisms that feed on other organisms for their food. Those consumers can be broken down into, depending on what they eat. So if they just eat plants, they're what are known as herbivores. So for example, cows. If they eat other animals, so they consume other animals, they're what are known as carnivores. So for example, a cat would be an example of a carnivore. And if they consume plants and animals, they would be considered what's known as an omnivore. And humans, for example, would be omnivores. And consumers you can look at, for example, predators. Predators are animals that hunt, catch, and consume other animals. So for example, spiders and cats, they would be considered predators. And then prey are the things that are hunted and consumed and eaten by predators. So for example, flies and mice as well. Now mice are also, you can classify them as predators as well, because they would eat insects as well, and then the insects would become the prey, for example. So this is step 5 in your habitat study. So you want to be able to identify consumers, and we talked about how you can use things like the keys, for example. So you can use these kind of things here. So these are known as keys, and they can use them to identify the different types of organisms or consumers that are present within your habitat. So that's that piece. So this is just step 5 in relation to the study of your habitat. Okay, thank you for listening.